I'm here with the great Siegfried to talk about Dragony and their latest record. Man, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I know when you watch my album review, you're going to laugh because I'm sure I butchered it. I'll let you say the name of the record.
Well, it's Latin, so it's a dead language, so nobody's going to complain. With my German speaking background, I would call it Hic sunt Draconis. So here be dragons.
Oh, Hixun Draconis, that's what I called it too. So I wasn't, turns out I didn't butcher it. And
Yeah,
Latin is basically the birth of my language because I'm Portuguese. So I
yeah,
should have a leg up on you on that. But I'm always afraid. I don't want to piss off anybody with mispronouncing names. And the album comes out October 11th on Steam Hammer SPV. Let me start off by saying this. I thought I was the only person, or at least one of the few, that knew about the lost colony of Roanoke. Um, I've watched so many documentaries about it. I'm totally into it in terms of what happened to those people. But in all of I'm not going to call it research, but in everything that I've read and everything that I've watched about it, I've never heard a take like yours.
yeah. And that's the Dragony magic, I would say. I mean, we did a pretty creative take on our own Austrian history on the last album, Viribus Unitis, with the Empress Elizabeth and Emperor Francis Joseph. So we did the same thing here, and yeah, the Roanoke colony. It's not that popular, I would say, but I mostly got into it thanks to the season of American Horror Story that was
Oh, the one that was
dedicated.
based on that
Yeah,
story.
exactly. So that's what kind of got me back into the topic. I'd heard about it before, but it's never at the top of my head. But that got me into it, and then now for this album, I really wanted to do an album with the title Hic sunt Draconis because we're a band called Dragony, and it's a fifth album, and it's the first one that actually has anything like with dragon in the album title or on the artwork. So it was about damn time. So that's how this whole thing started.
You guys took a long way to get there, but you got there. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, I don't know if you have availability to it, but there's a show in North America. I believe it's on the History Channel called World's Greatest Mysteries, and
Mhm.
there's an episode about the lost colony of Roanoke, and it gives you different theories that exist currently
Mhm.
on what happened there. So it's really interesting because they don't tell. Obviously, nobody knows what happened,
Yeah,
but they
yeah.
just give you these possible ideas of what could have possibly happened to them. So it's a really interesting show. It goes a little bit more into facts
Mhm.
than American Horror Stories, and definitely a lot more into facts than the concept that you put together. That is for
For
sure.
sure.
Now, how did you develop that concept? Because one thing is to watch that show and get the idea. The other thing is to then create what you guys have created.
Yeah, yeah. The idea was also to not only have an album that has like dragons in the title or the artwork, but also to do to make basically the most power metal album, because this is something that has been a thing the past, like, say, 5 to 10 years, especially in the European power metal scene. That the whole concept of like gimmick bands has been becoming more and more popular, with bands that have to have their own universes and lore behind it, and wear, opulent costumes on stage. And at some point, it seems like that the whole show and the look and the story around the band has become more important than the actual music itself. And I kind of was socialized with a bit more of the classical old school power metal, of the late 90s, early 2000s, bands like Rhapsody, With and Without Fire, and Sonata Arctica.
Without fire, I love
When
that.
it
I've
was still,
never I've never heard anybody referring to them like that. I'm going to use it if you don't mind going forward.
yeah, go ahead. So yeah, so those old school power metal bands of the late 90s, early 2000s, that had a bit more complex song structures. They had a lot of orchestra, especially Rhapsody. So I always liked that. And the recent trend in the music has been going a bit away from that to more simple song structures and to bigger focus on just the gimmick and image of the bands. And I kind of wanted to make a little bit of fun of that, while at the same time basically still doing the exact same thing. Because this album basically is kind of a combination, is like an amalgamation of both the old school Dragony songwriting that we've had in the previous albums, with like the classic 2000s power metal, mixed with actually this more modern sounding power metal elements as well, that is more synth based, with simpler song structures that from bands like Powerwolf or Sabaton or Beast in Black, for example. So I think with managed to strike a cool balance between that kind of old school approach and the new school approach musically. And yeah, the storyline just came along with it because we wanted then to make the most power metal album out of that. So we had to have all the typical cliches and tropes that power metal has these days and that are super, super popular. So what do you need? You need pirates. So we have the privateers. You need dinos and dragons. Just look at your Angus McSixes and your Victoriouses out there. And then you need the ever popular Vikings and Norse mythology, Ragnarok, end of the world. And we have all of that on the album. And that's why it is the most power metal album.
I know, but you know the funny thing about it is that you guys were able to create because in power metal there's a lot of cheese. So you guys were able to create an album that while having cheese, it has just the right amount.
I think that's the biggest challenge always because I love me some cheesy power metal, and I mean I'm in a band called Dragony, and you know you kind of know what to expect when you hear that name, and I think when you see the artworks, etc. But I've always like you always should put the music also first, and it should still be the center of your product. And yeah, like hitting the right note, that sweet spot can be tricky sometimes, but this is something I always felt we managed pretty well, not just on this album, but on all of our albums. So I think that was never the issue that we got too cheesy. It was always a little bit tongue in cheek and a little bit having fun with ourselves, but never like a pure power metal parody band or something like that. So
one of the things I felt you guys did really well on this album, and I think it's something that it's really kudos to you guys because I feel like a lot of you were talking about the genres and the genre and how it sounded before and you were talking more about the costumes and the lore, but I'll go even further into the sound. The sound of power metal used to be more guitar driven, and in the more modern days it's become a lot more orchestrally driven, synth driven, keyboard driven, whatever you want to call it, right?
yeah,
Which is taking a little bit emphasis off of the guitars in certain power, especially symphonic power metal albums. Sometimes you barely hear the guitars at all. It's just like keys and orchestrations and choirs. You
yeah.
guys didn't do that on this record. There's a lot of guitars on this album.
I think there's actually the most guitars on any of our albums on this one. So it's kind of opposite the trend because on our previous albums we did have a lot of orchestration usually, and yeah, sometimes the guitar sound was maybe a bit too thin and not present enough. But then on this new album there were two factors that changed it. First of all, we have a new guitar player, Matt. And he's a riffing monster, so he really contributed a lot of great riffs and great guitar parts. And then we had the mix and master done by Jacob Hansen, who is one of the best engineers in metal these days. And he was able to kind of really combine those elements to still hear the orchestra and still hear the keys, but you still have enough presence for the guitars. And I think that's a really great achievement. And yeah, we even have like I think some 7-string guitars in there, like in a song like Perfect Storm. I know Matt was playing the 7-string, and yeah, I think that adds the necessary heaviness. It's not for sure not going to be the heaviest album you'll ever hear. It's still European power metal, but I think it has a decent oomph to it.
Yeah, more than decent. That was one of the things that sound-wise really sold me on the record, is that you guys were able to navigate this fine line of having a symphonic power metal album, but with more emphasis on the power metal side, less emphasis on the symphonic side, where the symphonic side, at least to me, it felt like it was there to complement the storytelling, to complement the songwriting, but not to be the be-all and end-all of what the sound on this record was going to be.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is also a lot thanks to our orchestrator, Lasse Elkier from Denmark. We worked with him for the first time because the guy we were usually working with, Lucky Knöbel, he was not available this time due to other work commitments. But he recommended Lasse, and I got in touch with him. And Lasse is also a student of film scoring. He lives in LA and works a lot on those kind of projects. And you can really hear it with his approach to the orchestration for our songs, because he really puts I call it a very scenic approach to every part of every song. So every part of every song will sound different, and he really tries to give it a unique character, like you would do when you're scoring a movie. And I think that really helps. So because he doesn't want to put the orchestra front and center, but really to support the rest of the band and the song itself.
It worked tremendously. I think it's the selling point outside of the concept and the funny take, or the lighthearted take, I should say, on the actual story. what sells this album, at least one of the elements that sells this album, because obviously the other one is the vocals, but one of the elements that sells this record is this balance that you guys were able to find, and definitely giving a little bit more room for the guitars to breathe, especially when you compare. I'm not even comparing with other bands. I'm even comparing with your previous albums
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I didn't see that much emphasis on the guitar sound.
For sure. I think the previous one, Viribus Unitis, was already a step in the right
In the right
direction here,
direction, yeah.
where the guitars were more present. But on previous albums before that, yeah, there was always a little bit of an issue also with the mixing that we had. Because, for example, Master of the Multiverse was also mixed by our producer, Frank Peters, who we work a lot with in the studio. But when you mix your own stuff, that's not always the best choice. It's always good to have, a different pair of ears to do different parts of the work. And Frank is a great songwriter, great arranger, but when it comes to mixing, he comes from the keyboard instrument, so he's always like focused on those parts, the keyboards, the orchestra, and sometimes, yeah, maybe the guitars were not quite as produced or as heavy enough as they could have been. So, and with Jacob Hansen, he just, is a master at what he does, and he can like just focus on everything. I don't know how he does it, but he can do it.
The question is, how did you guys find a hole in his schedule for him to work on this? The guy works on everybody's album.
He does, and it was like a really like absolute, let's say, blessing in disguise moment, because we were planning to work again with Seb Leverman from Ordnogen, who had already mixed and mastered Viribus Unitis, because I think he did a great job, and it was really a step forward for us sound wise already. But he was not available because they had just been producing their own Ordnogen record. They were on tour, so not much time to mix and master another album. So we had to pivot kind of last minute to meet all the deadlines that we had set ourselves and that labels had set. And we just wrote Jacob. We'd been in touch with him before, like just seeing about his availability, and we wrote him again. It's like, yeah, listen, we have a little bit of a problem here. Would you be by any chance available to do another album mix? And he said yes, and we were very lucky campers.
Indeed, indeed. The dude has the Midas touch.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's incredible. Everything that he touches turns to gold. He's phenomenal at what he does. I have a very important question, because, at least important to me, when I was reading the press release for the record, I did not see anywhere any word on who the female vocalist
Oh,
was. And I was like, I'm sure it's not you. I mean, you have a great range, but I don't see you pulling that off.
oh, this I
So,
cannot.
so who was it?
Yeah, so on the opening track for the album Dream Chasers, we have Ombre from Alexandria as a guest vocalist. Yep. So she contributes obviously the female, but also the extreme vocals are hers. So that was a nice addition, I think.
Wow, that is a nice addition. Are you open to those type of collaborations in the future?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've basically had, I think, some kind of guest singer on almost all the albums. I think only on Master of the Multiverse we didn't have a guest appearance. Like on Viribus Unitis, we had Georg from Serenity. On Shadowplay, we had Zach Stevens from Sabotage. Even on the first album, we had Ralph Shapers from Primal Fear. So there's always like interest in bringing someone in for a guest appearance, and yeah, it just adds a little bit of a different flavor to a whole album, so that it's not just the same voice over and over by itself. So I really like that, and I would have some candidates in mind for another guest appearance. Maybe someone from Canada. I think that could be nice. But
I hope
more
you're
on
not
that.
thinking of me.
Yes, of course. But more on that next year.
Because that would be the first step in order to in the path of ruining a song, and perhaps even a whole record, was to have me there. Having said that, I did do some guest vocals on a Cambrium album a couple
Oh,
of
nice.
years back. Yeah, they needed a narrator, and they asked
Okay.
if I could do a narrator piece on one of their songs on their album, which I did. It turned out really good, actually, if you don't mind me saying,
Oh,
tooting my own.
nice.
Um,
Yeah.
but speaking of vocals, your vocal performance on this album is phenomenal. Super strong, great range, really matching the power that we have on the side of the guitars and overall sound. When you're putting a concept album together, does that have any impact at all on how you approach a vocal performance?
Not really, because I mean, it affects the lyrics, of course, because I want to write the lyrics so that they fit with the concept story. But the vocal performance, I think it's just always trying to go to the studio and try to bring out the best performance possible. Of course, I think it helps if the rest of the instruments and the rest of the songs are strongly performed, because it kind of motivates you more in the studio, I guess, to, give that extra last 10-15% that you might not think you have in you, but you have. Somehow you can conjure it. So thank you very much for the kind words. I also think it's probably my strongest vocal performance so far on from all our albums. And yeah, it was necessary, I think, to really do the songs justice and the production justice. But it's also, again, I think, a large part thanks to Jacob Hansen and the vocal production that he does to actually make the vocals pop like they do. It's also a skill in terms of the mixing and mastering, for sure.
How would you quantify and qualify your own vocal growth from record to record? Are you happy the path that you're currently on?
Yeah, I would say there's always been some improvement. I think when I go back now, listen to especially the first two albums, Legends and Shadowplay, there was like I can hear a lot elements in the performances where I say, okay, maybe I should have done that take again, or that part of the song could have been stronger. But back in the days, of course, you don't have the experience yet that you have at a later stage of your life. So it was the best I could do at that time, I guess. Nowadays, I would probably be able to maybe do it better or do it differently. I also had some vocal cord issues after the production of the first album. I had to have vocal cord surgery because I was using bad technique, putting too much strain on the voice, developed nodules. So that kind of set us back. So Shadowplay was actually recorded after vocal cord surgery. So that's why it's sort of like a little bit of a comeback album.
Was that a scary moment for you? Did you consider what the future would be like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the good thing in that situation was that, like, the band even now is not like a full-time job. We don't live from the band. It's a hobby. We spend more money than we make with it. But of course, you have to kind of face the music, so to say. You say, okay, if the treatment works out, then great. If it doesn't work out, then probably not going to be able to sing power metal like I used to, or not that kind of style. I could maybe do some other stuff because there were a few notes that I couldn't reach anymore, like especially in the higher registers that were affected by those vocal cord issues. But overall, I could still potentially sing. But I think the career trajectory that we've had with Dragony would not have been possible if the surgery or the treatment wouldn't have gone as well as it did. So I was really lucky there, knock on wood. And yeah, I've been trying to keep better care of my voice since then, and I think so far it's okay.
When you seek assistance or training in terms of the technique, what did you discover that you were doing wrong?
Just pushing too much, not having good vocal support in terms of breathing and the whole vocal creation apparatus, if you will. So trying, to press even the notes out mostly through the throat, not so much from the diaphragm, etc. And if you do that over a long time, then eventually you just damage the vocal cords because you push too much air too fast through your vocal cords, and that can be quite damaging. And now I'm trying to, whenever I sing, I try to be still relaxed. So and over time, of course, the technique got better, and you can control the vocals better. Even when you're singing relaxed and you think, okay, you have to really hit that difficult note, but you never need that much more air or anything. It's just mostly a head thing. And once you get used to that, once you understand that, then it's pretty comfortable to manage.
So now you got this album coming out October 11th on Steam Hammer SPV. When you're playing live shows, you're gonna have to promote a new record. Nobody goes and plays live shows and doesn't promote a new record. How are you gonna address that aspect of it? Because this is a concept album, so the songs kind of tie in with one another. Are you thinking about ways of bringing them out of that world into a more individualistic perspective?
Yeah, I think the concept works as an album, like if you listen from front to back. But I think the songs also work really well as standalone tracks, and because it's not like they're musically really closely tied together, like it's one big song that just flows one track into the other. So I think it's not really a problem to have the songs separate from the concept. I think both things can exist at the same time. On the one hand, you have the complete package on the album, and when you listen to it at home from front to back. On the other hand, when you come to live shows, you will hear 3-4 tracks from the new album, of course, because we want to promote those. And I think some of the songs are going to be really, really great for live. But of course, live we also have to bring some of the band classics and some of those songs that we will be playing to the end of our days.
With every record, does that job of putting a list together becoming harder and harder?
Yes, and because we also don't play a lot of headline shows, so usually we play support shows that can be, you know, between 30 to 40, 45 minutes maybe. So there's not that much time, and a lot of our songs can be pretty long, like the title track of the new album, for example. So we have to kind of figure out which songs do we play, how many do we take from the previous albums, how many do we take from the current album that we want to promote, and yeah, we have to find a balance there, and it's becoming tough because the old long time fans, they want to hear some of the older stuff, the deep cuts that, you know, get rarely played live or maybe never, but can we really put them in the set list and then, you know, say, okay, then this new song or this single from the new album has to stay off the set list? It's kind of it's really a tough spot, and now with 5 albums and 1 EP under our belt, it's gotten really hard. But I imagine a lot of fans that have even more albums than we do are struggling a lot more with that.
When you look at not just your band, but at the way the music business is these days, like you said, you have to have a full-time job. This is more of an expensive hobby. How much do you look at the online stats and be present on social media? How much of an impact do you feel like that has on, for example, the attendance at shows when it comes to you guys performing live?
I think it's super important. I think that's also what promoters look at nowadays, especially, you know, Spotify numbers. Not so much YouTube anymore. That used to be the case. I think YouTube video views was a thing for a long time, but that has been sort of replaced by Spotify numbers, listen numbers, follower numbers. That's, I think, the main metric that is the value currency basically in the business nowadays. And yeah, you need to be present, and that's really challenging also for like a part-time band like us, that in reality, you, even when you're not on tour, when you're not playing or working in the studio, you need to produce content nonstop. You need to hit, you know, release something on your socials basically every day, some good quality content that keeps the people engaged, because otherwise the algorithm will screw you over. Your visibility will go down, and it will be even harder to mobilize people. So you need to have a good presence on all the platforms. And nowadays you have your Facebooks, of course, for the older audience, which especially for like our kind of power metal is a very important audience still, because it's, I think, for a lot of older fans that come to our shows or will listen to our music. And then you have Instagram, that's kind of the most mainstream platform right now. And then you have, for the younger audience, you have your TikToks, you have your threads, etc. And you need to provide like different content, ideally for all of those platforms, that fits to each platform. And that's a full-time job in and of itself. And like a band like us, we actually can't manage that to the degree that it's necessary. I mean, you see it nowadays with pretty much all the touring bands. A lot of the touring bands, they won't have a live bassist anymore, but they will have a social media person who is just filming and taking photos nonstop, putting together really high quality reels from the show, from each and every show every night, to immediately post it the next day and say, oh, last night we were in Vancouver, look at your awesome crowd, and tomorrow we're going to be in wherever. And then they do the same thing again. And that's really such a huge focus right now on this kind of on the road media production. This is what I feel is what bands are really required to do these days, and it's insane.
I agree with you. I've noticed that over the last 2 years, more since the pandemic, maybe the pandemic kind of accelerated that, because I didn't see that before the pandemic, but since the pandemic, almost every tour that I go to, and I'm there with the bands, they have somebody that's their job. Either they have somebody with them throughout the tour, or they have somebody at the tour that sends the content to somebody who's whatever, and then that person is the one posting it. Yeah, you're right. It's becoming more of the role is becoming a lot more important than being a bass player.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm joking because, of course, our bass player Herb, he's also playing in Visions of Atlantis, so he's on tour with them a lot, which means we a lot of the times don't have a live bass player. So, but since we use a lot of backing tracks for all of our orchestra and choirs, etc. Anyways, adding the bass to that is not a big deal anymore. I'm going to be open about this. Of course, it's always great when he has time and when he can be part of the live shows, and he tries to make as many as possible. But of course, right now, for example, Visions of Atlantis are doing a huge 6-week European tour. So of course, yeah, if we have a show now, we're going to be playing the UK in next week, actually. And yeah, he's not going to be able to make that show, of
Yeah,
course.
I've seen Visions of Atlantis 3 times in the last year in North
Mhm.
America.
Yeah, they do the US a lot, which is cool. I would love to do a US tour at some point, or North American tour. But yeah, for a smaller band, again, it's a matter of costs and yeah.
I think that would be a good selling point. You guys in Visions of Atlantis, maybe you could come on stage and do an old school Visions of Atlantis song.
Maybe, yeah, we'll see.
I think that would be kind of
I'll talk to them. I'll talk to the guys. Let's see.
yeah, I think that would be a really cool package. Who knows? Throw Xandria into the mix, and then boom, Bob's your uncle. You have
Yeah.
a nice little really mix of.
Then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, and then you have a 33.26 chance of winning. You know. I don't know.
Wow. I,
I don't know if you got that reference. It was
I
Steiner
did.
Man.
I did. I actually I did. It's deep cuts. Not everybody's gonna get that reference, but I did, which is incredible. I mean, we started talking about Roanoke, and now we're talking about Kurt Angle. We've
Yeah.
gone like 180 on this whole discussion.
And I have to point out, you have to check out. There's a playlist on Spotify that is the Steiner Math promo. So it's word by word. Every song replicates the sentences that Scott Steiner was saying in his Steiner Math promo. It's fantastic. I don't know how someone
Really?
would have the idea to create that. It's absolute insanity, but it exists.
Wow. You know what? I don't have Spotify, but my son does. So we're gonna dive deep into that because both of us are huge wrestling fans. So I'm definitely gonna dive into that. Wow, that is I can't believe somebody has nothing to do or has a ton of time on their hands to put something like that.
Yeah.
One last question for you. And since we were talking about touring, with the album coming out now in October, we're approaching the end of the year. What plans do you guys have for the rest of 2024 and even into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, we have a few shows, of course, coming up. We have the, let's say, first official live show after the album release. Actually, immediately the day after, next Saturday, we'll be playing in Birmingham at Power Metal Quest Fest in the UK. So that will be really cool because it's the birthplace of heavy metal. So that's going to be fun to play our first show with the new album out there. We'll have a few shows later this year in December with Freedom Call. We'll be playing in the Czech Republic, and then have our album release show in Vienna on 7th of December. And then we're actually already planning, and we've just announced the first set of dates. Next year, we'll be touring with Sirius Black in Europe. We'll do a 2 weeks run. Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, I think is there, Belgium. So a couple of dates there. And of course, hopefully some festivals. We have one confirmed so far and working on a few others. Hopefully something will materialize. Would love to do the US again. Would love to do maybe, Prog Power USA, or even come back to 70,000 Tons of Metal, which we did in 2019. So yeah, just touring is the motto for next year, and trying to promote the hell out of the new album, because this is something we couldn't do with Viribus Unitis because it came out in the middle of the pandemic in January 2021. So there was no possibility to take it on tour right when it came out. This is something we want to do better this time, and it's looking really good, and we're very excited to take this one on the road.
I think it'll be easier for you guys, not just because of the pandemic, but the album kind of sells itself. It's a really solid record, so I think that then on its own is going to open plenty of doors for you guys. Because
Hopefully.
at the end of the day, that's what matters. People want to listen to good music, and this record was really good. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I love the fact that you guys brought some power into power metal, because I feel like these days power metal doesn't have as much power as it used to have.
Yeah, and I think we're always have to be a little bit contrarian in Dragony, and always like make a little bit of our own kind of fun, and poke a little bit of fun at maybe the trends in the scene, and while still kind of celebrating the same trends, or using the same trends, but we also kind of go a little bit on the meta level, and try to point out, okay, guys, gimmicks are nice and it's fun, but the music is still there, and we should pay a little bit more attention to that, maybe.
I agree with you. Siegfried, thank you very much for your time, man. It's an absolute pleasure finally to have you on the channel for us to chat. Hope to see you at some time soon, maybe next year at one of those shows. Never know. We go to Europe quite frequently, so you never know when we're going to cross paths. Thank you very much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to finally be speaking with you guys. And looking forward to seeing you. And whenever you hit Europe, I'll be following your social media anyways. And if I see that you're somewhere close, I'll make sure to say hi.
Yeah. Maybe we'll end up even at the same show. You never know. As just
Exactly.
guests there watching a show, you never know. You never know what our paths are going to bring us.
Very, very good closing statement. Couldn't have said it better.
See you, man. Take care.
Thank you. Muito obrigado.